co-hosted by the Association for the Study of African American History and Life, our partners over at ASALH. And it's a really exciting time of year for us because I know that a lot of people look forward to the grants kickoff as a really great opportunity to get federal program support into their organizations, into their sites, into their facilities, into their programs to wind up continuing to build out new and exciting programs or preserve really important but threatened structures. So it's really exciting time of year for us over at the Network to Freedom. And it's an exciting time for you guys as well. It's one of the 3 times of year where we get really busy. Obviously, the other 2 being associated with processing new applications and working with all of you guys in our network to try and support your work through technical assistance, getting you guys connected to other organizations, trying to figure out ways in which we can get you connected to other platforms and grants and all sorts of stuff like that. So I want to welcome all of you today and thank you for your interest in the program. I also wanted to take a moment to give you guys a little bit of the rules of the road for the presentation. This is being hosted by ASALH and the National Park Service. I'm going to be on first as the sort of program lead. I'm being assisted by Winnie Cargill, who is essentially like the indispensable Network to Freedom administrator. I think she's technically our GIS expert, but she does pretty much a little bit of everything. And so I know a lot of people interact with her. Also on the call from our program is Robin Krawitz, who is our acting program manager since at the moment, Diane Miller, the longtime program manager, retired last September. Robin is currently in the acting position. We also have Kamal McLaren, who's in the National Capital Region. We've got Ted Johnson, who is doing some work with us in the Southeast Regional Office after Sherry Jackson retired. Ted was with us for about 4 months, and he is back at Timucuan Bay, but he's still doing some work in the Southeast region, which is fantastic. We have another person in an acting capacity, Taylor Brookings, who's doing work in the Northeast region out of Philadelphia. And then finally, we have Barry Jurgensen, who I don't know if Barry's on, but I know a lot of people know Barry. He does all that great work out in the Midwest. And then I am the guy responsible for the Mountain West and the Pacific West for our program for the last year. But yeah, so that's kind of who we are. And as we work through the application process after today, most of the time, what we really would like you to do is wind up working with your regional representatives so that you get good information, you get relevant information, you get information on time from the person who works most closely with your area and has the most familiarity with your resources. So with that, I will ask Winnie to begin our slideshow. And I believe this is all getting recorded, so you can check this out afterwards as well.
It is being recorded, Dan. So let me actually go.
So I just wanted to start by saying again, welcome to the Underground Railroad Network to Freedom and Association for Study of African American Life and History. Where did the presentation go, Winnie?
Tried to get it. Hold on. There we go. I was trying to get it on the PowerPoint. And
it's okay. We're doing great.
For some reason. So.
Thank you, Winnie.
You're welcome.
This is one of the things that happens to Winnie. She just is responsible for all these technical details, and we just sort of like, oh, what happened to that? Can you expand to fit the screen, Winnie?
I can. There we go.
Okay, cool. And then you can advance to the next slide for me. As a reminder to many of you who already know this, what we're going to be talking about has a very small group of folks who are eligible for these grants. The first group of people who's eligible for the grants that we're going to be describing are current Network to Freedom members. So it's only these 780 Network to Freedom designated sites, programs, and facilities. That is the key group of people who get the lion's share of our grants. There is also one other group of people who gets access to these grants, which are applicants who are researching and writing new nominations for Network to Freedom sites in particular. Those are places where something that has to do with Network to Freedom Underground Railroad stories occurred. And so those are the two groups that can get access to these sites, and that's one of the or access to these grants. And I think that's one of the major benefits of this particular grant program, is that it's very, very focused on the National Underground Railroad story and trying to find ways that we can expand that story and bring in new stakeholders while also supporting the stakeholders that exist within our network. So please keep that in mind if you're someone who doesn't have a Network to Freedom site, that the key reason why these applications are relevant to you and this grant would be relevant to you, is potentially coming up with and researching a new site that tells that story. Next slide, Winnie. So in case you guys did not know this, we've been operating this grant program since 2002 in collaboration with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, or as we call it, ASALH. One of the reasons that we administer it with a partner is it makes it far easier for us to administer a grant program as a federal entity through a cooperative agreement than through the traditional grants.gov, sam.gov platform. It just makes it way smoother and creates a far better user-friendly experience for everyone that we're working with, because oftentimes the formal federal platform is very, very complicated and very difficult to sort of navigate. And so we, in our wisdom, or people before us in their wisdom, came up with a better way of working with ASALH to try and navigate the system so that we can actually make these grants available to our members who need them. And so in this year, in 2024, we're distributing $500,000 in grants to support projects that are focused on preserving the Underground Railroad and sharing Underground Railroad stories. Our grant program is focused then on preservation or restoration of Network to Freedom listed buildings. So sites, structures, historic buildings that are specifically listed for their association with the Network to Freedom, not necessarily a newer building that happens to have a Network to Freedom like exhibit in it. It has to be that the historic structure itself is part of the Underground Railroad history. We also advance grants that are interpretation and education projects that are associated with our Network to Freedom member sites, programs, and facilities. We support additional historical research for current Network to Freedom members. And then, as I said before, our new site, we also support new site applications to become a Network to Freedom member. And in this year, our grant awards will range from $1,000 to $100,000. So you should keep that in mind as you're planning for your grant. They're trying to figure out how our grant program fits into your strategic plan and your vision for your location, program, facility, site, and so forth. The applications are going to open today on August 17th, and they are going to close on midnight Eastern time on August 19th of 2024. So you have 2 months and 2 days to get these applications together. And they wind up getting submitted through our partner at ASALH, at asalhpartners.org/apply, which you can get that link on this slide. You can also get it through our webpage at nps.gov/UGRR. Do you want to advance the slide for me, Winnie? We also have a special emphasis area this year. So as we're working on this is actually the same emphasis area we had as last year, mostly because we thought it was a really good one, and we got a lot of projects that did good work in this direction. And so our special engagement emphasis area is student engagement. And so we want to encourage student engagement and education. Education is pivotal to the Network to Freedom's mission to honor, preserve, and promote the history of resistance to enslavement through escape and flight. Educational opportunities will encourage collaboration with youth representing our diverse communities today and promote continued preservation of sites and stories of the Underground Railroad for generations to come. And when we think about student engagement, we're thinking about development of educational curriculum that is oriented towards students. We're also thinking about student engagement where you're having students participate in the creation of interpretive programs or students who are participating in research. For example, last year in San Antonio, we awarded a grant where we were paying student interns who are college students to prepare Network to Freedom applications associated with freedom seeking in Texas. And so those are good examples of student engagement that we recognized as sort of meeting our special emphasis areas. Does anyone else, on my team have any examples that they would want to raise of student engagement that they recall from last year? Just to give some folks some example ideas. Seeing none, I assume I've done a perfect job explaining student emphasis areas. Can you move on to the next slide for me, Winnie? As I said before, we do this, we administer this grant program in collaboration with ASALH. We do this through what's called a task agreement and a cooperative agreement with them that we've had some form of since 2002. And what that means is that we provide the funds that wind up being administered in the grant program to ASALH. ASALH does the actual distribution of the money for us. NTF handles all of the technical assistance with the grant. We also collaboratively work on reviewing the grants with ASALH. But at the end of the day, we rely on ASALH as our partner to help us distribute those funds and manage the paperwork aspects and the financial aspects of the grant, which makes it a much, much simpler process. So when you see us referencing asalhpartners.com/.org/apply, that's because it is a third party that is helping us. They are a third party who's helping us with this program, and they are central to the success of our program. So don't think, oh, I've gone to the wrong place. You should be aware that this is sort of part of the design of how this grant program is laid out to make it, again, more user-friendly and easy to access. Next slide. Which gets us to what we can fund. And all of this information that I'm going to provide to you is available on the grant website. So all of it is stuff that I'm essentially just going to read off, but you can have access to on the website in a static place. So you don't have to be like scrambling to write all this stuff down, just to sort of get you thinking about it. Again, the goals of our program are preservation, interpretation, and education about Underground Railroad history. Projects that we support, that the projects that you develop should support or enhance Underground Railroad associations for which the site, program, or facility was listed in the Network to Freedom. Examples of grant projects that support these objectives and are eligible for consideration include, but are not necessarily limited to, markers or signs identifying the site as being in the Network to Freedom, interpretive markers, brochures, exhibits, websites, or videos, historical research in support of interpretation or publications, oral history and documentation of oral traditions, educational curricula, lesson plans, and teacher workshops, cultural resource surveys, including archaeological surveys, preservation and restoration of historic buildings, structures, and landscapes, projects to enhance physical accessibility to sites and programs, including installation of ramps or lifts, National Register of Historic Places or National Historic Landmark documentation or nominations, workshops and public education programs, technical assistance in association with the site and or landscape identification, preservation and stabilization of cultural artifacts, collections, and documents, research and writing for applications to list new sites in the Network to Freedom. Which brings us to sort of a list of what is not funded. And anyone who's got questions at the end about things like how their project may fit into this list, you can ask at the end, and we will try to provide you with good answers. We're also going to have other opportunities for open office hours to talk more about these as well. And again, you can always reach out to your individual regional coordinator to get more information and to provide you with technical assistance on navigating the grant programs policies and sort of approach and framework. Next slide, what is not funded? We do not fund certain kinds of things, so keep these in mind as well. We will not fund projects that are already started or currently underway. We will not fund the purchase in fee simple or interest of historic sites, building structures, objects, or cultural artifacts. We will not fund operational funds or administrative salaries. We will not fund equipment purchases. We will not fund new construction in contrast to repair of existing features, with the limited exception of new construction required to create access for the disabled to the historic resource. We won't fund religious properties listed in the Network to Freedom Or their religious properties listed in the Network to Freedom are restricted to preservation projects or NTF signs only. These projects must have a specific connection to Underground Railroad history rather than the religious history of the site. We won't fund projects that are designed to raise additional funds. We will not fund projects that do not have a direct connection to the Underground Railroad. For example, a project to preserve a building in which an exhibit is housed is not eligible for funding if the building is not connected to that Underground Railroad history. We also don't fund, and this is a really common one, the federal government won't fund food or refreshments of any sort for events or programming. And this is a new one as well. We will no longer fund recurring annual programs, events, or workshops. In the past, we had people ask for funds year over year, and sometimes they would get them and sometimes they would not. And it really created a situation in which there was a false sense of expectation from the grant program about why was it funded one year and not the next. And so we as a program decided it was more consistent for us to fund first-time events, first-time programs, if they are intended to be done annually. But that funding is meant as sort of seed funding to get the project off the ground, not as a sustainable approach to running your project every year. So that's something new for people to keep in mind that we've now included as something that we do not fund. Yes, Dolores, the slides will be available on our website afterwards, as will the recorded webinar. All right, next slide. There are requirements once grants are awarded. Grant-assisted preservation projects must acknowledge NPS grant assistance throughout the duration of the project. That could include putting up a sign that simply says that this preservation project is being completed using funds from the National Park Service. Because we require you to put up a sign, you can include the cost of putting up a sign within your grant, because you only have to have one up at the site. For non-construction projects, NPS grant assistance must be acknowledged on any projects resulting from the grant. Text for this acknowledgement will be in your grant agreements if you should get awarded a grant. All grant projects require monitoring and approval by the Network to Freedom staff. So that means that the staff, your regional coordinator, is going to be involved in the project with you and helping to sort of figure out where you're at in your grant and how it's going. For interpretive projects, products, markers, websites, and so on, staff must approve the content and design in the draft stages, and invoices for the payment must be approved by the Network to Freedom staff before they are submitted to ASALH for payment, which just means that we're involved and we know what's going on with the federal funds in the grant. And then we also have the requirement that all grant recipients must ensure that the projects are carried out in a timely and professional manner, and that interim reporting schedules outlined in the grant agreement must be followed. Grant funds must be expended in a timely manner and in a manner as described in the grant agreement. Something that we're also adding this year to that particular last requirement, our agreements this year are going to wind up including sort of a drop dead communication requirement, so that if we're not getting communication from the grant recipient in a certain number of days, which will probably be between 30 and 60 days, we will reserve the right to suspend and cancel the grant because of non-communication from the grantee. Which sometimes will happen to us is that we will have someone apply for the grant, get the grant, and then they've got, let's say, $40,000 to do a project, and then we never hear from them again about the project, and it just sits in an account and no one else can get access to those funds. And so we're creating sort of within our agreements a process that we can make sure that we're able to re-award those funds to some other group that's going to make better use of them. So keep that in mind. And then the next slide. As you're working on all these grants, please keep your grant applications, please keep in mind that the Network to Freedom staff is here to help you with your grant. We can answer questions about your grant application, its formats and its details. We can help you solve website submission issues with ASALH. We can also talk through your project with you. We cannot do anything that is considered prejudicial. We cannot tell you what you should be doing. We cannot provide you with sort of feedback that gives you a sense of what is and is not acceptable or good or bad. We can only kind of coach you through what the guidelines for the grant are, and also provide you with some sense of what is the best way to fill out the application with reference to being detailed and describing what you're up to. We cannot review your grant application in advance and provide you with comments prior to the submission. That's the really important part of this, is that folks will say, hey, is this going to work? And the answer is, like, we can tell you whether or not it's a technically sound application. We cannot tell you if it is going to be a winning application. So that's something to sort of keep in mind as you reach out to us. And again, we are happy to work with you to make sure that you feel like you have the best understanding of what needs to be in the grant application, and to sort of coach you through that process. Yeah, Winnie, you can go to the next one. All of the applications are submitted online through the Asala Partners website, asalapartners.org/apply. You can get all of the information on that website before you start filling out the application. It is an online form that I believe you do have to fill out in a single sitting. And so in filling it out in a single sitting, you want to make sure that you read through the website so you have all of the categories figured out, and you should fill out a Word document of the information that needs to be in there so you can copy and paste it into your live application, which once it's submitted is gone to Asala for us to review later. But all of the information is available on the website. I believe also there is a .doc version of our application on the website as well. So you can download it, fill it out in a .doc, and then copy and paste the information into the online application form. Is there any additional information on that, NTF team, Winnie? Anyone else?
Just that all the forms, so the application and then the other required forms are available to download as PDFs, so you can have those ready and fill those out by the time you sit down to do the one sitting. So you can have everything prepared and filled out.
Yeah, and with the application, there are requirements that the person who owns the NTF listed, the NTF member resource, has to give consent. So you can't have a third party write for a grant for a particular location if they don't have the owner of that location's consent. There's also a grant agreement that says that a certification that everything is accurate. There's also a certification for matching funds, which we did not mention. Matching funds are not required for our grant program. However, if you're able to match either 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, you do get additional points when it is reviewed by the team at the end of this process, which we will provide more information about that in the future at our other webinars. Next slide. So that you know how this works is after the deadline closes, the portal will close on August 19th. We will form a committee of Network to Freedom staff and Asala staff to review the applications. Committee members will independently provide a numerical rating for all grant applications based on the elements of the application, including its completeness, demonstrated validity of the budgetary figures, and documentation of the need and threats to the resource. We will combine that score with any bonus points that the grant application receives, in particular this year for educational involvement, or student involvement and student engagement, matching funds. We also give additional points for first-time applicants to the grant database, or the grant platform, I should say. And then we rank all of those overall across as a group, and then we award the grants based on how much money is available from top to bottom. We just sort of go down until we run out of money at $500,000. And this becomes a competitive process. In 2023, we did have $1.8 million in grant requests, and we're only able to fulfill $500,000 in those requests, and we only wound up awarding 13 grants overall. So it means that it is a competitive process, and it really is important to have a very technically sound, well-reasoned and well-explained and described grant proposal in order to get funded. Simply being a designated site does not guarantee you access to the funds, although it does guarantee that you have access to the grant competition process, which is pretty exclusive. Yeah. Next slide. We also are doing something new this year. For anyone who's gotten grants before, it used to be sort of an ad hoc process. Once a grant was awarded, you would receive from our grants manager the contract. It would get approved. There would be, you would submit reports to your regional coordinator, and you'd submit invoices to your regional coordinator to be passed through. And it was a lot of emails. And so this year we have worked with Asala to develop a online grant tracking portal, which hopefully will be much, much smoother and nicer, so that you don't have to track like 1,000 emails ranging from the last year and a half about your grant project. But once you sort of get into the system, there's a one-stop shop for everything that's related to our grant process and communication about grants with our team, and also with the Asala team. So after you're accepted, this all happens after the grants are awarded, so you don't have to worry about this at this point, but anyone who's done this in the past will know this will be useful to you. But it is going to provide better sense of transparency about where the invoices are and why they haven't been paid yet, for example, ability to track reimbursements, ability to view and read status reports of projects, and ability to communicate with Asala tech support on anything that doesn't work for you. And also just way more, really important, way more transparency about reports and paying invoices, which is the number one sort of bugaboo. Is like, wait, where do I put the report, and how does it get there, and who is it supposed to be sent to? It's really going to simplify everything for everyone involved, is the hope. So that's something new that's coming out this year. Next, and so if you get a grant, you can look forward to that. I also wanted to share with you that we are going to have more office hours in the coming month ahead. We have 3 more that are planned for June 24th at 5 p.m., July 11th at 1 p.m., and August 13th at 3 p.m. We've tried to select a diversity of times and days of the week so that people can make it if they're, to one if they can't make it to another one. And what these open office hours are going to do is provide more technical support for how to get through the grant application itself, and also provide more information about the required forms and what you need to have to be for your application to be complete. We will wind up distributing those links to people as the same list of folks who've already received them for this one. We will send those out in the future to those as well, and they'll also be advertised on our social media site as well as our website. Yeah, next one, Winnie. And so we just want to, again, give you sort of a summary of this. Again, our grants portal, our applications are open from June 17th, which is today, until August 19th at midnight, which is a Monday. Midnight Eastern time, I should stress. Our special emphasis areas are, again, on educational programs that are produced as part of the grants, as well as emphasis on student engagement. And also we give additional bonus points for matching, which we forgot to put on there, matching funds, as well as first-time grant applications. First-time grant applicants, I should say. So if you've been in the network before for a long time and you've never actually applied for a grant, you would get bonus points. Similarly, if you're creating a new application and you're not associated with any sites and you're trying to get a new site listed, you would also get those bonus points. So we will now open it up for Q&A about this. I'll start with some of the ones that are in the chat right now. The time limit for the application essentially is going to wind up being, because it's a static web page, there is no time limit for the application to get done unless your website times out, which can take a while, which is one of the reasons why we stress that you should fill out a .doc version of the application first, so you can just copy and paste stuff in. But you should be able to have a couple hours with it. It's just one of those things that you should be aware that, like, you can't leave it open for days. It will time out. The other next one, and that was from Doris. The next one is from Angela. The determines are going to be made if the deadline's in August, the determinations get announced in October. This is to allow us for time to review all of the applications and sort of go through the competitive ranking process. Also, it has to do with how busy our schedules are and our partner schedules are in the fall around the end of the fiscal year. So it's a little bit of extra time. So apologies for that. It is just sort of part of our process. Are there any other questions that folks have at this point?
Let me stop sharing, Dan, so I can see if people have their hands raised.
Yeah, do that. Dan Zalewski writes, if a curriculum was just finished, can the application be to underwrite the cost of implementation? I just lost it. The cost of implementation of said curriculum into school districts within the region and include professional development. If I'm understanding your question correctly, it's that you have a curriculum product, and what you would be doing is writing an application to train other teachers in how to use that product, and also to figure out how to roll it out with school districts. And I think the answer, if I'm understanding it correctly, is yes, you can do that. You can't write a grant to pay for something that's already been done, but I think you can write a grant for educating teachers about Underground Railroad curriculum that exists, I believe. I would also, if any of my colleagues have a correction on that, I would happily yield to you. Are there any other questions related to the grant platform at this point in the grant application process for projects? Do any of my colleagues have any additional information? Oh, there you go. Sean, the grant duration is going to be, if they get awarded in October of 2025 or 2024, the duration, the grant must be done by December 31st of 2025. So it winds up being a 14-month grant period or performance period. Dan asks, can we combine curriculum development with teacher workshops? If you're developing a new curriculum, and then part of the grant is to develop the curriculum and train people on it, then the answer would be, I think, yes. You can put those things together. A lot of it comes down to whether or not that curriculum already exists. We're not going to pay for something that's already been done. The next one is from Robin. Can you write a grant to implement an interpretive program around more general African American history if an NTF site is one component? I think that's going to be, Robin, I think that the answer to that question is going to be a matter of emphasis. It's one of those, like, we'll know it when we see it kind of categories. If there's a strong Underground Railroad component to the interpretive program you're putting together, then yes. If it looks like it's just like a kicker and it's sort of a sidecar and it's not really central to what you're doing, then the answer is no. Again, it's one of those things where we fund projects that are about the Underground Railroad, and that we won't fund projects that don't emphasize the sites or emphasize the program. And so that is going to be one of the key things to sort of keep in mind as you're developing these things, is that our point of emphasis is Underground Railroad history first and foremost. And we do recognize that Underground Railroad does happen within a larger context, and that explaining the larger context is important, but that Underground Railroad is the centerpiece. Did anyone on my team have anything to add to that answer? I'm getting nods. Everyone's happy. Thumbs up. Great. The next question is from Roseanne. Do we spend the funding first and then get reimbursement, or do we supply the invoice and the funds sent to us or to the supplier directly? I believe that the answer is that actually, do we usually, I think we've done this both ways, but I think there is a default that is a reimbursement. So you have to, you have to spend the funds first, and then there's a reimbursement that comes to you from Asala once we have a receipt and an invoice in hand. Is that correct, team? Yeah. That's right. Apologies, I'm not usually the person who runs our grant program. They're unexpectedly on leave, and so I'm trying to. We're sort of improving this together a little bit. The next one is, are extensions granted for unavoidable delays in implementing a project? I think that the answer is maybe. It comes down to the negotiation, the details of the delay, and it also comes down to having a lot of communication with your regional coordinator about what's going on, so that they feel like they're comfortable and understand what's going on with your grant project, rather than like, oh, we ran out of time. It's now December 30th and we need to get a 1-year extension and our team hasn't heard from you. And the answer would probably be no, you're done. So that is something to keep in mind as well, is just make sure that anything that happens, we know that when you're putting out a grant, that's your best case scenario, and that as you get into a project, a lot of contingency happens, and just make sure that you're communicating that contingency with your program coordinator so that we're aware of what's going on. Angela, the application I would be submitting would be for a program in October. Would it still apply? The answer to that is probably not. It'd probably be too tight of a timeline for us to get you funds for a project that's already like happening at the time of the grant. The grant is being announced. You don't know if you're going to get the grant, and two, when we say mid-October, that's sort of a loose time frame, because sometimes they get delayed by who knows what. And so that's something to keep in mind. I believe that we can send a link for the webinar to everyone who participates today, so you can have the information. Is that something we can do, Winnie, or do we just sort of?
So we can put the PowerPoint up for now, but the actual recording will have to be we'll have to upload and make sure it's 508 compliant so everyone can access it.
Okay. Yes, it'll be a little bit of a delay. Rebecca asked, is it a requirement that applicant sites be listed to the National Register? The answer is no. It is no longer a requirement of our program. If you were doing a preservation project, I think it might be a little bit more debatable, but for programs and new listings, it's not. Anyone else got anything? They're good questions. Yes, Ned. Ned asks, are university students included for student engagement? Absolutely, they are. We awarded, as I said, a couple of projects last year where university students were doing Underground Railroad application research, and they got the bonus points for that. Ted, did you ever hand up?
I did. I just wanted to add for folks that are in either the NPS or other government agencies. The question came to me today: are there exclusions for those that are federal entities? It was interesting because their site, their NPS, their NTF designated site was designated before it was donated to the national park. So this question was, now that we're a national park and own this site and maintain it, are we now excluded? So no, and for two reasons. One, again, as Dan's explained, that the site, as long as it's designated, no matter who's managing it, is eligible. And then we've had several NPS sites who are designated, and then they apply, to continue with their interpretation or program development. So just want to make that clear for those that are NPS or government, federal government.
I'll leave it open for a minute or so more. Oh, there's go. Does community engagement, rural community count if there is no university? Doris, the emphasis is on student engagement. So if you've got a program or you're developing a project that involves students, and they can be high school students in that project, then that would count. Yes, high school does count. Good question. Angela, would public education programs about the Underground Railroad count, such as, well, it just slid down on me, such as living history programs at the site? I think the answer is yes. If it's a program that's oriented towards student engagement and education, that counts for the bonus points in the special emphasis area. I would say this, as you're thinking about the bonus points for the special emphasis area, it has to be very clearly oriented towards student education and student engagement. It cannot be sort of like, we won't award the points if it's sort of a tack on. You have a preservation project, and at the end you'll say, oh, and once this is preserved, it'll obviously be better for field trips. Like that would be like, that's true, but it wouldn't fit our need as demonstrating its connection to the special emphasis area. Willie asks, suppose you have another entity involved, such as a university, using some of their own funds. Could you use funds to involve local resources, such as high school students, in the project? Yeah, so when we had students that wrote applications, we were paying the grant was for the students to get grant funds to be paid for their work. The compensation is an important part of sort of how we think about it. Can multiple NTF sites apply for a grant together? For example, multiple sites along a particular route for a project about that route? I think the answer is yes. Also, I'd not really thought about that before, but yeah, it would seem that the more relevance you can get to the more sites, it would be good.
Dan, if there are no other questions, I was gonna share my screen so that
Yep,
people
go
can
ahead.
see contact emails, and I'm happy to put it in the chat too.
Yep. Seeing as feel free to type in more questions if you got them, but I'm gonna have Winnie's gonna go ahead and put up the closing slide.
Yeah, so these are our people of contact for your region. If you're in the Northeast region, you can email Kamel or Taylor for any of your questions. Dr. McLaren. For the Midwest, Barry's not on, but he's happy to answer your questions as well. So for the Southeast, you can either email Robin, who's the acting program manager, or Ted, and Dr. Dan can also do the Intermountain and Pacific West region questions. For any technical assistance on documents or anything, I'm happy to answer those questions and set up one-on-ones to talk further. And if you just have general questions, feel free to reach out to our Network to Freedom at nps.gov email.
All right. Thank you, Winnie. I'd also like to thank everyone for attending today's kickoff webinar about the grant program. Again, as Winnie said, please feel free to contact us about any questions you have about the grant program, the grant projects, what you're thinking about. We're happy to sort of help you figure out how to go through the process. And also, please be sure to keep an eye out for our future webinars about how to complete the applications. And again, keep an eye open for an email from us with a link to the webinar, which will be made 508 compliant in the weeks ahead. So with that, thank you so much to everyone. Thank you to my team, and we will all see you around. Have a wonderful Juneteenth week.